started. It's 4:30, right? Okay, it's 4:30. We'll start the public hearing for regarding unanticipated funds. I guess I'll read the notice. The selectmen will hold a public hearing on Monday, September 23rd, 2019 at 4:30 p.m. at the Littleton Community Center, held room as prescribed by RSA 31:95-B, Section 3, and RSA 91A:2, to discuss the acceptance and expenditure of unanticipated money from the state, federal, or other government unit or private sources by the selectmen. The source of income is the New Hampshire Department of Safety. On August 9th, 2017, FEMA declared a major disaster for the state of New Hampshire due to severe weather which occurred on July 1st, 2017. This authorized the Public Assistance Grant Program for eligible applicants within Cohasset and Grafton County. The town of Littleton currently has one project under this disaster that has been deemed eligible for reimbursement. A check will be sent in the amount of $64,762.18, representing the federal share of the total approved eligible cost of the town's awarded project, PW 97 Grants Portal Project, 1486. Provisions for persons with special needs can be made by contacting Selectmen's office. So that's the summary of. We don't have to read all these other documents, do we? Into the record? So I guess at this point, this is half hour, right?
No,
15 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're open to any questions from the board or the public for that matter on this. We knew this was coming, right?
No, I believe there's more still out there. So, yeah, and one of the issues that we found was our record keeping practices at the Public Works Department weren't up to par. Made it difficult to track down the expenses and file the reimbursement. So it's taken quite a bit of administrative effort to go through and fund it and need to.
Have we or are we addressing those issues that resulted in that?
Yeah, that was one of the first things that I wanted Doug, and I was researching a software package that's designed specifically, it seems like public works software packages are designed specifically for getting these kind of reports out. It's going to be really simple.
You get federal money.
Yeah.
Perhaps I could fill in a little bit if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
These funds are for some various roads, and they're not complete yet. We're exactly there. There's still some work to be done in Old Whitefield Road. If you look at the packet that I gave you, there is Gagnon Road. Gagnon Road. If you look at the packet, you can see the areas where it says it's not complete. And most of it's paving, which is going to go on, it just hasn't yet. The estimated cost that's left for completion on these roads is $64,358.84. And this is from FEMA, what they're estimating. Now, our Public Works crew may have already done some of the work, which I can bill toward that amount. What has to happen is I get timesheets, I get work orders, I get material orders, and invoices, proof of payment of those invoices, and any in-kind work that might have been done either by someone else or by our staff. So even our materials that we might have on hand can be booked against that. So if we have a culvert, we need to put in a culvert, we can use that culvert. I just have to prove the value of it.
Forgive me, I'm not seeing what you're referring to as your packet.
Well, there was a packet that was emailed to all of you, that was quite lengthy, about 17 pages
Yeah,
length.
so that's a busy piece of it.
That's just the top cover. I'm sorry if you didn't, I believe it was mailed to everybody, no?
I don't think it came through, but that's, yeah.
Okay.
My
I probably
computer's
got it. I think I know, like I got it because of the size and internally, we don't have restriction for internal house-going.
Yeah, it could be the size of it. That's why it didn't come
The
through.
entire packet was probably just
17 pages.
Yeah. I bet that's
I
it.
should have received it, but I don't see it here. But we don't have the restrictions. So. But, okay.
Here, I
The
can give
information
you
is-
a copy if you'd like, so you'll have it for your records. It doesn't have the cover page, but it has all
Would
the...
this have come directly from you?
This would have come from me, from FEMA, directly from me.
okay. I'm talking about the board packet that sealed sent. Did you get a copy of that?
Yes, the package that Seal sent. I
Yeah, the
have
cover
it.
letter. Just
But it doesn't have what she just described as the packet.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying.
Yes,
So this describes each road that's part of this particular project.
No?
We do have additional projects that we haven't got money on. One is Broomstick, which is in the works. If and when that gets finalized and approved, we should get from FEMA $145,419.50 on that. We're also expecting an administrative reimbursement for the cost of, example, all of your salaried employees that have put in time against the FEMA projects, and they only will reimburse 5% of the total projects that they have helped finance. And that reimbursement is $50,367.06. But I haven't got notification of the award of that yet. In total, the total projects that we have is $307,341.21. We still have about $225,000 to complete, which includes this project. I know that the Public Works Department has already got authorization to use some of the funds toward the Public Works Department, including some software. The original software they were thinking they could get was around $3,000. It's not going to do it. They need something better.
They received authorization from whom?
From the selectmen back
Before we got the money?
in June, when we got the money.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
We've had to do this in increments.
Yeah, okay.
Because they have sent it in small increments.
Okay.
This is one of the larger pieces that we've gotten. And anytime that we can have some funds given to us grant-wise or FEMA-wise or donated to help offset some of the taxpayer costs to improve these roads, it's a great thing to do. It helps out our taxpayers.
Okay, thank you. We've got 5 more minutes before we open up the other hearing.
Is it okay to ask a question?
Yeah.
So it says that a check will be sent in the amount of $64,762.18. Hasn't been sent yet.
It's been sent.
Okay.
I can't post it as receiving it until I get the approval from you. I can put it in deferred revenues until you tell me and give authorization of what to do with it.
I think you should give it to the selectmen. You're not even making a motion for that? To give it to the selectmen?
I don't think we'll go that road.
Bonus.
Yeah. Are you looking for a motion?
We still got 5 minutes before we can do that.
Check your email, see if anything comes up. If not, it's an SNS issue.
Look at that, it came through. I have it. Don't know what happened Sunday, but it's here.
I have it too.
Something tells me it was operator error.
What do they call it? Error between the headsets? I don't know. I know it sent it, but maybe whatever network I was on.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Put it on the network.
Yeah.
When all else fails.
Yeah. It was timestamped though. Sunday at 9.
Very weird.
This and I'll have to give you other information.
We may have to do this again.
I'm just going to give you some of Milton's has some activities reports that he gives to me. I'm just going to pass them on to you so you can see. There has been some redaction just because there's some always pending left. Well, not always, but.
Thank you.
There's one extra, so
Is this on the agenda tonight, or is it part of the report? Just part of the report.
I didn't want to go over it line by line, but just know there's information available to the public about zoning activities and different activities that the zoning office is working on. There are over 70 building permits. And right now is the time of year when the foundations are all getting poured in a mad rush, so milk goes out, check setbacks. And, since we really don't have that many more requirements beyond setbacks for typical building permit, at that point it's pretty much right after the setbacks.
This is Green Acres.
Interesting. That'd be a good story. Maybe we could ask the full, like, a report on that one. See if you have any video.
We don't, it's not that we have to do anything with this anymore. We still
Just kind of, updated activity. Yeah. And there's
What's crypto?
really a lot of, things that aren't already being pursued.
I have no voice.
All right, so let's
Eventually.
Yeah.
entertain a motion. First public hearing.
I'll make a motion to accept the $64,762.18 from FEMA to accept and expend.
Seconded.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous, and we close that public hearing, and we have another public hearing to go into. Another public hearing regarding unanticipated funds. The selectmen will hold a public hearing on Monday, September 23rd, 2019 at 4:45 p.m. at the Littleton Community Center, held room as prescribed by RSA 31:95-B, Section 3, and RSA 91A:2, to discuss the acceptance and expenditure of unanticipated money from state, federal, or other governmental unit or private sources by the selectmen. The sources of income is from the New Hampshire Department of Safety for the Littleton Highway Safety Grant, grant agreement number 20-106. The grant amount is limited to $14,069 with a grant period start date of that's October, right? October 1st, 2019 and the completion date of September 30th, 2020. It is the mission of the Office of Highway Safety under the direction of the Governor and the Commissioner of Safety in partnership with New Hampshire law enforcement to save lives and reduce injuries on New Hampshire roads. As part of the effort to achieve this mission, officers assigned to grant-funded overtime patrols are expected to be highly visible, engaged, and vigilant in addressing all observed motor vehicle infractions and hazards during their shifts. Provisions for persons with special needs can be made by contacting Selectman's office. So that's the extent of this public hearing. You want to get any more summary or detail on that, or?
Chief Smith, speak to that.
So this is a grant that we apply for annually. We used to have to do numerous grants. They decided to compile them all into one grant. So these are highway safety patrols that we get for distracted driving, DUI enforcement. We have patrols that we do for that, pedestrian and bike patrols on our Main Street area. For bicycle and pedestrian safety. We do Operation Safe Commute at least once a month. Join the New Hampshire Click, which is make sure it's for seatbelt enforcement for individuals under the age of 18. And a number of other closely related highway safety details that they request that we do. You'll see that the total is $14,069. On the other maximum match required line, those are in-kind monies. For example, the amount of time that we calculated takes our administrative assistants to put together the paperwork and everything to submit to the state to account for the time the officers work. These are overtime, so they're done in excess of their normal duty hours. So my request is that you accept the grant of $14,069 for grant number, or highway safety project number. I believe it is, it's a number here, 20-106.
Since we've got a few minutes here, I understand that this is to be used for overtime.
Yes.
You had mentioned the matching, it's a match grant. So were we able to match it entirely within time, or?
Entirely. And it's been like that every year.
Yeah.
Now they
Any other questions from the board or public?
It's going to start.
This starts October 1st and it goes till September 29th of next year. There are specific dates that we do have. I believe you should have received the packet that I forwarded to Steel. And there are some specific dates that we do for example, the clicker ticket, or some of the specific Operation Safe Commute dates. Those we have to, we're mandated to do patrols on those dates.
And it's the dates, so we have to
Cool.
He and I will sign after. We're going to meet if these funds are accepted, then we'll meet on Thursday. We'll sign it. Do you have any other questions?
no extra training on any of these because you're already doing them, correct?
No, we're already doing these. If there is training required, that comes out of our pocket. Traditionally, we send our officers to advanced DWI protection schools, things like that help with these grants.
All right, we have 10 minutes to wait before we close this out.
Thank you, Chief.
Thanks, Chief.
Which one are you talking about? The crash?
Enter scan and receivers. If you could use
If you copy one.
They managed to spend a lot on I'm sorry? We overlapped the other one, that's why I was a little surprised that we can. But I'm not, the other one's, we're 15 minutes. Yeah. Slow.
Yeah, where the No, I don't think so. It's got to go this distance around in case someone walks in and Hey, Skylar, how you doing? Yeah. You did?
I've been around for a while. You were talking about this.
Good call. First.
It's interesting that I was talking to our selectmen. They do it. Non-public, right? Yeah.
Was it doing some mapping project?
Yeah, we're just wrapping that up for them and setting them up with the access channels. So I did a little documentation.
Any town administrator?
Yes.
What's his name?
Yeah, some of it's busy, but it's good.
They've been having there's like property valuations of the more desirable area.
Some nice properties that you don't buy, I tell you that. Actually, nothing's here. What's it called? Walter's Basin?
Walter's Basin's not too far. So we're just waiting for a public hearing. We have a set time period for a public hearing, and we have to keep it open until 5 o'clock. So I'm accepting grant funds, so everybody.
I think a few things.
There you go. Is that right? Control it or just, remember that book, How You Felt Young? I think it's probably safe to entertain a motion. Entertain a motion on this?
I'd like to make a motion to accept and expend $14,069 from the New Hampshire Department of Safety, Office of Highway Safety.
I'll second it.
All right, any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None? Unanimous? Public hearing is closed, so now we can open the selectmen's. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. So we'll start with our appointments. First on the agenda, Sheriff Stiegler from the Grafton County Sheriff's Department.
Good evening, thanks for having me. First of all, by way of introduction, I've met two of you. My name is Jeff Stiegler, and I was recently elected as the sheriff here in Grafton County. And I thought before I came up tonight, I've been working on the fiscal year 2019 report, so I just figured, well, why not provide them all with a draft of, just very important to me that more people know who we are, what we do, and why we do it. But I'm obviously here to entertain any questions that you folks may have. I know we do a considerable amount of all the communication services with you folks. Thus far, phenomenal relationship with your police department. Chief Smith's been very accommodating, him and his officers. We've reciprocated some duties from time to time, some of the things that cross borders and stuff. It's been a good start.
I'll take in a short time here.
It is. So essentially, the Sheriff's Department is tasked with four primary statutory and constitutional duties with respect to what you see on page 1. The security of the court, which you see by way of our Superior Court, but the Haverhill Circuit Court is also in the same building, so it doesn't make much sense to have the judicial branch providing the security, and we can do that under our umbrella. The service of civil writs, which is a process that only the sheriff and deputy sheriffs can serve by under the Constitution. The transportation of people who've been detained or incarcerated, both juveniles and adults, from various locations around the state. Tomorrow I'll be traveling to Burlington, Vermont to bring back a fugitive to our court system that's waived extradition. And the apprehension of folks that have failed to appear in the court system or court warrants that have been issued. We have a real crisis with bail reform. I'm sure that you folks have heard a lot about it. Representative Hennessy is here. I'm sure she could speak to it to some degree. It's very problematic and it's very taxing with what's been done here without getting into a philosophical debate of what's right and what's wrong with respect to bail. It is literally a revolving door. Just newer legislation has caused with respect to the amount of hours that we put into trying to find these people. We do this very softly with low-risk warrants, if you will, by sending out letters saying, kind of, did you forget, just like a creditor, to ask people to come in and turn themselves in. And then we'll resort to utilizing various search engines and next of kin and that sort of thing, and following up and trying to find these people. But some of these hours are lengthy, and obviously budgets only go so far to try and get these people in. An effort was already underway when I arrived. We enhanced it a little bit. I'm very pleased with the work people have done, but we are way behind the curve with respect to over 400 outstanding warrants as of this morning that I was looking at. But those are our primary duties.
Anybody in this room?
No. But those are our, that's our primary function, are those things that we do. And then we've also taken on some specialized duties, if you will, where we move into the criminal investigation division, which we're not looking to be every town's detective. However, I do recognize from being, I guess, spoiled, if you will, from working for a quarter of a century in a city detective police bureau, that it's very rural in Grafton County for the most part. Perhaps the southwestern tier in Lebanon, Hanover may have some better resources, but lots of times there are conflicts that come up, so we'll get calls from police chiefs about investigating something. The state police will call because they're so swamped with sometimes could be police misconduct or town official misconduct, and they just don't have the time to look into these things. The AG's office will call about the same thing, and again, budgets only go so far. So we try to do the best we can. We're also tasked to agree with all of the incidents that are reported on the county complex. Grafton is very lucky in my eyes. I spent several years on the Attorney General's Drug Task Force, so I get traveling around the whole state, where the jail is. And I can tell you that most counties are very spread out as far as where their resources are. You could go to Coos, for example, and the Sheriff's Department's in Lancaster, and the administrative offices are up in West Stewartstown. And the nursing home is in Berlin. So we're very lucky to have everything right on one campus. I know it seems like to most the bigger towns, the Littletons, the Plymouths, the Lebanons, you're driving to the middle of nowhere in my hometown, Haverhill, but it's just where that is. We've also taken on a very strong initiative with the ICAC program, which is Internet Crimes Against Children. I'm very thankful that both the state and the federal government is very supportive of this program. So a lot of the perks that go along with this are paid for. We do a lot of online investigations with predators trying to bring sexual exploitation against children. With that has also come kind of a new era that my predecessor had started, and I just subscribed to it wholeheartedly and believe it needed to be advanced. So we've actually opened up a room close to this size. It's an actual functioning lab. There's nothing like it in North Concord. I know we've helped you folks here in Littleton as well as just about every other Grafton County department at this point, because even if any department in Grafton County, maybe other than Lebanon, even if you had the kind of employee that I have in the detective that's doing this work, with a post-secondary education in the field and very comprehensive training, how often are they going to use it? You will have some times where it just seems like it's the only thing that's happening. It's this second crime scene, electronic devices, and there'll be other months where there's other hot button topics that the town needs to address now, and that kind of goes to sleep. We are active every day in our lab with federal authorities, state authorities, and Grafton County law enforcement agencies trying to get the most evidence that we can from these extensions of everybody's lives today. So
what does an affiliation mean? Is there an actual?
You have to become an affiliate. Many years ago, when I was in Laconia, we became an affiliate. It was a grant that was set up by the Portsmouth Police Department. That's where kind of the central hub of the ICAC system is. Actually, the lieutenant that's running that now is an old partner of mine, and we were on the drug task force together way back when. But he is the one that takes in the kind of applicants, if you will, to become affiliates and investigators. There's a lot of training that's involved with ICAC. It can be done certainly on the ground level. I'm not sure if Chief Smith is probing into this as more resources start to become available. But the more agencies we have with the basic understanding and ability to get it started, we can certainly take it from there to move it forward. ICAC's a very, very important thing in the protection of children.
Yeah.
And I don't want to miss anything here. We do retain a detective on the Attorney General's Drug Task Force. I don't know if anybody in the room isn't aware of the opioid epidemic that's been going on, as well as other dangerous narcotics. It's a world. When my law enforcement career started here in this town in 1985, it was a big thing with somebody with a bag of marijuana, which today is, quite simply just not a priority. There's a lot of death being sold, on our streets, and combating that with a multidisciplinary approach is very, very important. So through a grant that funds 60% of the funding of the salary of the person who have assigned to that position, we're able to work with several other partners in it's called the Northern Drug Task Force, which covers Grafton and Coos County, but it doesn't exclude them from traveling to. They were in Carroll County a couple weeks ago because the case got bigger. They may end up in Concord or whatever, but for the most part, they are here as a resource in Grafton County and Coos County on a regular basis. As most of you probably know, a local guy by the name of Tom Andros leads our communications division. This is somebody who is renowned statewide, countywide as just a leader and an expert in the field of communications. I am a huge advocate for what he's trying to do. Perhaps one of the most neatest pieces of technology I can show you is just in my phone. I can literally, because I have cell service here in Littleton, I can literally hit an app and talk over a police band radio on my cell phone with no cost. It just runs off an app, through your cell phone, and that's just a portable radio that you can hit in our dispatch center. It's just in a test phase right now, but as radio technology, as Tom has explained, is changing, it will become more self-service reliant going forward in the future. And as I stated in here, training is very, very important to me. I'm sure Chief Smith feels the same way. If you don't keep people, trained up to speed on relevant topics, we're not going to be successful. And I guess in addition to my report, you can see there's an organizational flow chart that I thought was very important to establish when I took over. It just really kind of shows you what our responsibilities are and those three components in our department, the criminal piece, the operations piece, and the communications piece for people to utilize the services that we provide. I've said a handful, so
Just a quick question, going back to your cell phone app. Several months ago, maybe over a year ago, I lose track of time, representatives from AT&T were here talking about their contract to expand coverage throughout, and recognizing their, at the time, it was explained to us that they were, I don't remember the exact numbers, but they were supposed to hit 90% of all the residents in the state, which means that they could exempt the entire North Country and get 90% of the residents. I'm curious, have you seen any expansion in coverage?
I have. Pittsburgh is incredible up in Cohos County, the number of towers that they have up there. I mean, the 4G network there is better than down here. But you will see, as you know, there's a new tower going up in Bath, which will enhance some of Lisbon, primarily Woodsville, where there's just no cell service. I do know along the 25 corridor in Warren, Northwood, a couple of rural towns, a couple more towers are going up there.
Is that all related to that?
Yes, it's all related to the FirstNet build-out. They have 5 years to build it out. It's supposed to be good for 20 years. It's the contract that I've had advised.
Good.
I'm certainly hoping to see good things come out of this. Communications paramount to whether it's emergencies or just the day-to-day business. It's just the life, the world we live in.
Thank you.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
Do you guys have any questions for?
No, thank you,
Thank you.
Cheryl.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Next on the agenda, Aaron Hennessy.
Thank you. Erin Hennessy, I'm one of your 3 state reps, and I have made this appointment to give you an update on the budget, which I thought we would have complete by now. Unfortunately, we do not have one. I have not heard whether we'll have one to vote on Wednesday or not of this week. If we do, it should be a compromise budget. If not, we'll do another continuing resolution for the state and continue to try and work out the differences. Legislative time period for new bills for the 2020 session is over for the House. You can go online and click on 2020 LSRs and read through them. There's about 450-ish right now. The Senate has, I don't believe the Senate's put theirs in yet. So when they put them in, there's usually about 600 to 700 in the second year of the session. So once all of those come out and they become bills and signed off by their sponsors, I can come back and give you an update on any that look town specific, and hopefully give you an update on what the budget is as well. But as always, email me or Facebook me like Selectman Stearns does with any questions that you have. I'm happy to answer anything anytime. So I'll make another appointment when I have more information for you.
That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next appointment is Chief Mercier. Hey, Chief.
Good afternoon. So I'm here to speak about the contracts, the EMS contracts with both Sugar Hill and Easton. Both contracts have been drafted, underwent legal review, completed, sent to the representatives of both towns. We had to make some minor corrections, things such as name changes and signatory changes and things of that nature, which have been completed. Currently, we're just awaiting approval from those towns. As of last week, I received a report from both towns, the contracts with the changes and other items look very good. and we anticipate approved contracts by, I would say, October, probably beginning in October. We're dealing with some vacation schedules, so it's kind of tough to get all the people together that need to be put together to attend the meeting. But I'm sure that will happen quickly enough. We go over all amounts.
What's the schedule?
Yeah, we'll do that.
Well, we'll go over that in a second. Just to give you an idea, the Sugar Hill contract is, both contracts expired in April. The Sugar Hill contract is for $1,938 per month, and the Easton contract is for $904.40 per month, for a total of contract total for $34,108. How many calls do you call?
I want to believe it was approximately 50 calls in Sugar Hill and 40 in Easton.
So I assume the contract amount just took into consideration typically how many calls you get from that.
Yes, we did.
And so we're holding what they approved at their town meeting.
Okay.
So this is the same contract amount that they were paying to the previous contract.
Okay, I have a question when I read this earlier about the renewal process. So it doesn't automatically renew. It appears that at least 120 days prior to the expiration of the contract, you have to notify them you intend to renew.
Right, correct.
And they have to notify you as well?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And at that time is when you decide if you're going to offer to renew at the same rate or change the rate?
Yes.
And you feel like going from year to year is better than doing like a 2-year?
I agree. For now, you gotta understand, this is relatively new for us, so we thought it would be much more appropriate to go from year to year in anticipation of any changes that might come up, whether it's call volume or types of services. So we thought year for year initially would be more appropriate.
That's good.
So it will be retroactive then, because it's going to start theoretically August 2nd.
Yes.
So it'll be,
We had a verbal agreement to continue services at the current rates, even though we didn't have a signed contract in place.
We haven't started billing them yet for it. Or do we bill them?
I don't know how that process is going to work completely. I think we need to work through that with them.
Gotta
Whether
catch
they
up.
get an invoice from us or if they're just going to pay it on a monthly basis. Or
What I usually do is send a once-a-year invoice and show the monthly payments
Okay.
and ask them to pay monthly. If they aren't caught up, then they have to catch up in that first payment. I've done that with special detail for other communities or prosecutor for other communities.
Okay. The fee schedule's in there. I know we haven't looked at it yet. Are we supposed to do that at the same time we're discussing this whole thing?
We should probably do a separate motion to adopt the fee schedule. It'll be our fee schedule as well, and then adopt each, or approve each contract.
The fee schedules in these two contracts, I assume, are identical, and that's the same fee schedule we're using.
That's correct.
That's correct. I don't have any other questions on this. Just curious about the renewal process. Do you guys have any questions?
I'm just curious, how come it didn't go from like March 31st to April 1st or April 1st to March 31st? Was it just easier?
It was just the timing of everything. And, by the time we were up and running, by the time we engaged both towns have engaged us, looking for a provider, in those conversations, we felt it was just better to go with the timeline that was in place. So that's why it is the way it is. And that's why we're going, I'll say, annually, because we may very well change that contract timeline. But for now, we felt that that was the best way to go about it.
So once we reach April of 2020, it will be April through March.
Well, it says April to April, April 1 to April
Oh,
1
right.
versus the 31st.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
You're gonna pay us twice for April 1st. Any other questions? The fee schedule, I see the note was that it's based on recommendations by a consultant in working in cooperation with, where the hell did it go? Working in cooperation with the billing service? Is that what?
That's correct. So we MRI helped us with that, and the billing company, the three of us got together and came up with that fee schedule.
I have no idea what other fee schedules look like. I mean, I assume it's similar to others. Have you looked at others?
So I did on a statewide basis. It's not. It's pretty much on average, depending on the type of service and where it's provided. Unfortunately, a lot of things it may be a little bit high for the North Country because a lot of towns aren't really good about going back and updating their fees. They may be the same fees from 15 years ago. And as you may know, with healthcare, you can bill whatever you want, but you can only collect what's allowable from the insurance and from the federal payers. So it's almost,
You could double these and get the same amount. Right?
Yeah, it's almost like monopoly money to a certain degree, but it's the rates that were recommended. What you may see as a net result of this is us requesting a write-off of the gap between what the insurance pays and what we bill. That money has to be accounted for in the system. So we'll come to you on a regular basis and say we need to write off $300,000 worth of losses. That money never existed to begin with.
That process will be similar to the abatement process.
Correct.
Okay.
And it would be the same for each town, because it says that we agree to provide emergency medical care and transport to persons within the town of Sugar Hill, also Easton, regardless of their ability to pay. So we would actually, that would be written up as well, and that would be presented to us, three separate, so we kind of have an idea.
So, yeah, we will work with our billing company on that. I would say that my experience with EMS billing systems, it should be something they can do. We'll engineer it up front. We'll set that expectation up front, but I just don't know for certain because I hadn't made that specific request.
I guess I don't understand why that's relevant. The contract is going to be the same. They're going to pay us no matter what. We're talking about the individuals receiving the service, right?
That's correct.
So why is it relevant whether they're in Easton or Sugar Hill or Littleton?
If we want to know the write-off amount in each town.
You may find that you're providing more charitable care to one community as opposed to another.
But it's only charitable because of the rates we established.
And if you have, correct, or if you have a true self-pay, somebody that doesn't qualify for any of the programs available or has not chosen to enroll in anything and just refuses to pay.
Yeah.
Kind of like anything, you just get to a point where you can't get blood from the stone, then you end up having to write that money off. So.
Okay. Well, it'll be an interesting learning experience. So what's our task here?
So if you
Accept the rate schedule first, right?
Right.
I'll make a motion that we adopt the fee schedule as presented as Exhibit A.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No. Okay.
I will make a motion that we approve the contract with Easton for ambulance services.
Second.
I guess I should ask if there's more discussion. More discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None.
Make a motion that the board approves the contract with Sugar Hill for ambulance services.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. All right.
You asked me.
Oh, that's right, we should, I'm sorry. I completely missed that. We've taken a vote, but we could always take that back if we need to. Any public input on these Sugar Hill or the Easton, or the rate schedule for that matter? Okay.
I was going to ask, did you forget or change your policy?
Excuse me?
Did you forget or change your policy?
Both. We changed the policy to get input as we go. We forgot to get the input when we were reviewing it. We changed our procedures, not our policy.
Actually, a couple, just if Joe could quickly clarify there, the Sugar Hill contract, that's for, if I heard that correctly, $1,938 per month.
1,938 a month.
Per month, and then Easton 904.40.
Yes.
And then total, did I hear 24,108?
34,108.
Oh, 34. And Captain Miller, it's for calls for Sugar Hill, where you said 50 per.
Just recalling off the top of my head, I remember there being about 50 medical calls in Sugar Hill, about 40 in Easton, but that's, I could be off on that. That's just shooting off the top of my head.
Figures. Yeah, obviously that would be annually.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Obviously that would be annually.
Annually, correct. Yep.
Okay, unless you have anything else, we're all set.
All right, well, thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
And next on the agenda is the town manager's report, which we all have now.
Got it. All right, so first up is the events policy. So this is not really a policy, it's guidelines. And the reason that it's guidelines is because this is already a requirement under New Hampshire state law that any event has to get a license from the select board. So the purpose of the guidelines for license application for theatrical parades and open air meetings is to establish guidelines and procedures for the application process and management of special events in the town of Littleton, really in accordance with Chapter 286 of New Hampshire RSAs. It outlines the operation of events on the town of Littleton property, streets, roadways, and associated fees, charges, if applicable, for related services provided by the town. The procedure will help the event organizer determine the requirements that are to be in place in order to effectively plan and execute a successful special event, protect public health and safety, and to protect those and taxpayers from externalized costs associated with the event. So we have a draft here, and it's largely based on a draft that's been accepted in licensing shows, open air meetings, billiards, tables, and bowling alleys. So in New Hampshire statute 362, it says no theatrical or dramatic representation shall be performed or exhibited in no parade or procession upon any public street or way, and no open air public meeting upon any ground abutting thereon shall be permitted unless a special license therefore shall first be obtained from the selectmen of the town for licensing committee for cities here in Patrick provided. The law does go on to specify specific fees for the application, and then also the town's ability to bill for any externalized costs that may be determined by public safety, health, or health boards. I know you've had a chance to look at a draft. I want to cover, there are some considerations. I know Chad and I actually had a further conversation via email about some of the considerations that are in here. One is, does this or does this not cover private property? I think that it does, especially if it's abutting a public way. And then something that the board would want to consider. This, after looking into it further, it looks like this is specifically intended to do that. For example, in Bath, they have the Jerry Jam Festival, which brings in, I think, anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000 people. That's on private property. but it does cause a need for additional municipal services. And so it protects the town from that process, or from taking on this additional process.
So this would apply to anything of 50 or more people?
Yeah, I'm just not comfortable, someone could have a wedding, someone could have a graduation party.
Yeah, I had more than 50 people at my son's graduation party.
I've had bonfires with more.
So would that fall under this requirement?
It does.
Well, it says theatrical representations shall include plays, concerts, pageants, live musical performances, or other forms of shows or entertainment, feats of agility or public competitions.
So
That doesn't fall under any
it
of
doesn't
those.
cover the bonfire. It doesn't cover a graduation
Or a wedding for that
or a
matter.
wedding.
So was it your intent when you put this together and from the other sources to specifically limit it to these items?
That's actually state law with this part.
Oh, okay. So then, I don't know, it might be, I don't know, do we have an opinion whether it would apply to those things?
I don't. I would say if we look at it, it probably tends not to have it.
Maybe 50 is the wrong number to have. Should we start something at 250 or something like that? And that may, an event with 250 people on this property, A, is really going to limit the number of parcels that we're talking about. But B, probably rule out a lot of those other activities.
So let's say that we were going to have 50 anti-FOB members decide to hold I'm just using it as
No, I
offense to
understand.
them, but if they wanted to have an event on a town, a parcel abutting the town, which was essentially like a sidewalk or something like that,
Yeah.
that could, given the violent history of that group, could require that we staff additional police officers or contractors.
Right. I don't, as long as those things like you said, wedding, graduation, whatever, are not included, I'm not sure I have a problem with the 50 people aspect of it. And we're not talking some prohibitive fees or anything like that.
And just to speak to the fees, one of the other things that we explored was, should not-for-profits have to pay a fee? And rather than do a blanket dismiss, just not-for-profits are required to pay, the group I mentioned before has a not-for-profit arm. There's probably a lot of that. So we figured it'd be better to have the board look at it on a case-by-case basis if there was a request for fee waiver.
Yeah.
And these fees are specifically for the application. It involves, reviewing state statutes, fire, health, safety code, and then actually inspecting the site and, if required, inspecting the actual event itself.
And additional fees may be levied if they determine that it's going to take overtime or police or full-time fire.
How would that be determined?
Fees, the additional fees. So that would be, we'd have a different schedule that we could use. For example, I think Chief Mercieri had given me a communication about, an event, like this weekend's event, for example, if we brought on an extra EMS crew, an extra fire crew, then what we would do is look at the actual cost. So, the overtime costs, the total costs.
And who would levy the costs? Does that come the selectman every time, or do you, as town manager, or have?
We would assess the fees. We have another policy that we're starting to work on called fees for municipal services. So we'll be looking at that in the future. We're, in uncharted territory as far as Littleton goes. but-
It just seems unreasonable to have to come to the selectmen to have set a fee for those things, unless it's trying to waive a fee or something like that.
Right. So our RSA 1059 actually does speak to specific ones that the chief of police can require that have to do with public safety and health and safety.
Going back to forms of shows of entertainment, feats of agility in the theatrical bill, where it describes the theatrical representations. How does this mend with the Parks and Recreation policy when, for instance, if you were to have a baseball game, it's probably going to be more than 50, and then it probably would fall under either entertainment or feats of agility. So are we going to have a policy at,
So if it was a, right, so if it's a municipal town-sponsored event, those are exempt from this policy, but for the example, homecoming is a good example. I would prefer that the school group, submit this application to help us know what to do. And then the town, the board say, well, we're gonna waive that, but, at least we've been able to go through the entire process. On the side note, also, it would be good if we were able to get the school's baseball schedule ahead of time, so that we can prepare with the staff that we have to prepare the lawn, anything else that might need to be done ahead of time for those events. But this would not impact the fees that the Parks and Rec already has for leasing the parcel. This is just getting permission for those events.
Okay.
Say an event is on, like the River Commons, whatever we're going to end up calling that. This also covers this so that the applicant doesn't have to fill out numerous applications.
So what this would do is get them the review process that would allow the event to take place. The parcel itself will have, like we did recently, would have its own leasing. This is
So lease the property added to
this
this.
secures the event. Yeah. As allowable.
And I think towards the end, there was something, so I believe we asked the applicant to submit this at least 14 days prior to the event. But we also, I believe, there's a member for the selectmen are to sign off on this. Have we, I don't know if we need to have the discussion or not, but if it has to be done at a public hearing, at a public meeting, or once, all the proper officials are, sign off on this, then we just, it's another thing to sign to seal's office.
So the way that this is set up is because it's really a day-to-day management piece that I could sign off on it after all of the departments have given their requirements. The 14-day timeline we have in here right now, we will be coming back to you with some additions or subtract, to amend this policy to make it better. The 14 days is really not adequate to be able to really plan. I've seen that there's a lot of communities that have different versions. I've seen some that have different events broken down into different notifications. So it's something really simple. It is a really quick process. Whereas if it's, Jerry Jam coming to town, it requires like, a 90-day notification process. So.
Could we do a time parameter versus just one?
Well, that's what I'm saying. What I would like to do is get this on the books, but then give us time. I know, like, for example, Chief Mercier had about 14 points to recommend amendment in here. But in order just to have a process on the books, get this, and then we'll over the next, say, year, we'll go through and refine and come up with some changes that make it better.
So in other words, at least we have something besides
something rather than nothing.
just rather than nothing, and then we make it better as we go.
And this one has been vetted by several communities in the state of New Hampshire specifically.
So why is there a sign off for selectmen at the end of that?
I think that's just left in the application.
Okay.
Yeah.
What would be the process for a renter or something like that if they wanted to get the fee waived? Do they come to the town manager? Do they come to the select board? I worry because in the summer, for instance, we meet once a month, so if that has to be a board vote, then there has to be significant timing.
Yeah, it would require a board vote.
Do they just write a letter to the board or something to that effect? Or
make the case. Yeah. We didn't include something specifically because I can see what will happen is everybody's going to request a waiver, and that's not the intent of this. The intent is to not externalize costs onto the taxpayers for, having the planning that goes into this. And, an interesting thing is almost all of the towns in New Hampshire response. I do have this policy. One of the major sign-offs is the town planner. So we don't have one.
So we can't get anything signed off?
Right, no, I think so. But, my plug for town planner.
Yeah, well, I think we can talk about this till we're blue in the face. We can poke a lot of holes in this, but recognizing the intent is to get something on the books, none of us think this is perfect. It's a good starting point, I think, so. Are we supposed to do anything with this?
If we're after the motion. So to consider making a motion to adopt the guidelines and application for license.
So I guess certainly take any public input on this issue of having applications. Sure, go ahead.
Yes, how do you define, what was the description or the definition of public spaces and abutting public spaces? Like, is this any parcel of property next to a public road?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, so for example, if a business chose to have a bluegrass singer as a normal part of their operations on a Friday evening, that would fall under that by definition.
Yeah, I've read where some communities will say, like, let's say a business has a schedule of, performances, or they're going to be having performances every week to get a more blanket permission that's just good for a whole year.
Okay, well, sometimes these change, and they often change spur of the moment. So that would force our business. Every time we had a Friday night performer or a Wednesday night performer, please realize we would have to come to you every time that happened, and I think that's an unfair onus to put on a business.
Well, couldn't you get authorization, as he just said, blanket for the year for every Friday night, and whether you use it or not? I don't.
Okay, well, it depends on the specifics of the application. Do I need to designate the artist? Do I need to give a time parameter? I mean, there are a lot of specifics that can change over the fluid course of a year. And I think then if we're not talking about publicly held parcels, but publicly abutting parcels, I think that's a very different thing. And I think that needs to be, my recommendation would be to think that through very carefully.
So this is state law already. What all this is doing is saying that the town is adopting a procedure with an application to enact this state law that we're already supposed to be doing. So I think that what you might want to do is see if the state law definition fits that. I'm not sure that it does. The state law says no theatrical or dramatic representations shall be performed or exhibited, and no parade or procession upon any public street or way, and no open air meeting upon any ground abutting thereon shall be permitted unless a special license therefore shall first be obtained from the selectmen of the town or from a licensing committee for cities. So I'm not sure that what you're describing actually fits this.
Yeah, I mean,
what we probably
seems,
want to do is look and see if this does. So
just seems pretty ambiguous in that sense.
Yeah, right. It might not actually cover a concert unless that's considered
Or just a singer.
theatrical, or dramatic. So that's something I'll ask.
We can find out.
We'll talk.
So this is state law that we should have been following all along. We haven't been.
Well, and we have.
Is that what you? So what's the
some extent.
ramifications that we haven't been? So what? I don't get it. It's state law we haven't been following, but now we have to.
When we're notified, I mean, we've followed. For example, we worked closely with Schilling Brownfink on the Oktoberfest 2 years ago. We went through a similar process with your event planner.
Sure.
With the music festival recently, we went through a similar process that we did before. As far as events at other parcels, we probably have.
I just want to be clear that this isn't being. I don't want to put words in your mouth. You coming to us with this not not in order to comply with state law, but in order to have a process in place that we can manage this and identify if there are costs we're going to incur and not have to eat those costs.
Right. And protect public safety. So if there's an event that's going to have a lot of people.
Right. No, I understand.
We're doing our due diligence according to the law.
Is this is somewhat standardized what's already been in place? For instance, I'm thinking the Halloween event that's going to happen with the jack-o'-lanterns is somewhat standardized as what's already going on with the two chiefs I know that are involved and other services.
We do work with the chamber and all those groups already.
Yes, this law that you just mentioned, and I've been living here for 15 years, I saw a lot of concerts, a lot of events outside with no interference from the town. So this is something, that whoever applies let's just say, Shirley, if they're gonna have a concert outside, they gotta fill up an application, right? They gotta pay for the application, right? They gotta pay for probably a policeman to be over there, making sure that everything, goes according to the rules. This is kind of, a monetary approach for anybody to have something is going on, right? It's that's the way I see it. Why you come up with this law? 105.9 RSA. It was never applied in Littleton, as far as I know. It could be probably 20 years ago, yes. But right now, in the last 15 years,
I think the impetus behind this, again, is to make sure that the taxpayers aren't footing the bill for these events that are going on. Now, maybe what you're saying is true, maybe not. Maybe things get waived, maybe not. But if there are fees, if there's an event with 3,000 people and we have to beef up the police force and the safety crew, and there's going to be costs, and the Littleton taxpayers have to pay for that. This is a mechanism by which we can make sure we recover those costs.
that's in this application, it comes with the cost. Over the individual that are gonna have this particular party or whatever it is.
So there is an application fee, is that what you mean?
Yeah, and also with the cost, because,
Well, if there is, there may not be extra costs. We don't, it depends on the event. Is that?
Yeah, and again, this is a procedure to follow the state law. What it does is it begins a communication process so that we could coordinate with some event organizer to tell them or see what kind of security they have. I'll give you an example. The event this weekend had what we deemed to be adequately trained and staffed security. There was no requirement for additional police. They provided their own. But it's those kind of conversations that can happen, and a determination can be made with the applicant, what level of service that we have to have and what that's going to cost. But this gives a formal process for us to have that communication.
Thank you.
Any other?
I would think before you enact a policy that you really want to take a good, hard look at the wording of it, what it includes and what it doesn't, and perhaps run it by council in regards to comparing it to the state law. Aaron just made a good point. Depending on the wording of the law, the words shall and may be interspersed and have very different meanings. I think if the way it sounds now, it's a real onerous situation on somebody like Jeff Cousins. And I don't think you want to do that to Jeff or any other of our good tax-paying businesses in town.
Thank you. Has this been run by town council?
Multiple communities, town councils. And I've been working with Naomi at Fishbrook on this one. And again, this is really reflecting state law.
I understand.
So it's not a policy, it's a procedure. The policy already exists from state law.
So why are the selectmen involved with setting a procedure? Do we typically set procedures?
Not a policy, the policy procedures, yeah.
If this is just a procedure, then...
You'd be directing me to be the signature.
But I think it's semantics here. We, in effect, if we vote in approval of this, we're implementing a policy that we haven't been implementing before.
Right.
Whether it's a procedure, whether we want to call it a procedure or not. That policy has existed, but now we are directing you to follow that policy. That's state
A
policy.
guideline of how to proceed with enacting that state law.
Okay.
Make more money.
Any more input?
Not that I wanted to forgive my tone, I'm fighting a asthma thing.
Stay over there.
I was asthma, not contagious. I'm breathing thing. But have we got records or, I don't know, any documents that say that these events are placing a burden on, fire and police?
I can look in.
Yeah, that's be interesting to know.
Yeah, if you want to listen to whatever the chiefs have to say.
Do the chiefs have any input on that?
No. I can tell you, this weekend we had to put on extra staff, and I'll give you just a ballpark cost on that. Probably near about $3,200 that we expended to have extra staff on board to accommodate everything that was going on in town. You have to understand that even though we have events in town, there's always other events and circumstances that come up. It just doesn't mean that no one else has a medical problem or a fire problem or a police problem.
Sure.
And this weekend we got hit pretty hard too, because we were notified that we would be covering the towns of Whitefield and part of Bethlehem. So we were stretched pretty thin throughout the entire weekend, but putting on extra staffing, that's about what the cost was.
So that extra cost would be passed on to the event people in this case? And this could be.
Could be. And
Or a portion thereof.
that's according to 286.
So
that's already law. It's in.
Well, I understand, and I probably broke the speed limit coming here too, so that's
Chief Smith.
So these are just guidelines, and I think for an organization or a business like Jeff runs, he's already got the checklist down. He knows exactly the questions that we're going to ask, but there are many people that come to us throughout the year that don't have a clue. They're like, well, we'd like to have a parade. And then we explain to them, well, it's cost X amount of dollars to do a parade because we can't utilize, we have a very low volunteer force. We have targeted X amount of parades a year that we already budget for that quite honestly are done with volunteers, through volunteers and police service. We had to pull somebody in this weekend. We're certainly not going to bill, but that costs $400 just to bring the one person in for traffic control because traffic was more than what was anticipated. And there are other significant areas that this process does review. I can understand Jeff's concerns about having a business, having a weekend, every weekend having somebody playing music within their venue, which is standard business practice. But we're not reinventing the wheel, and certainly we can reach out to communities like Plymouth. They have a set, this goes on every weekend down there. I'm sure that, and our guidelines are basically mirroring Plymouth's and other communities' guidelines. And certainly we can ask them the same questions that you're asking, like questions about athletic events. But eventually these things do cost money beyond what our budget can handle. And I think we have to be able to look at these both globally and strategically and be able to determine what the total cost is going to be. And if in fact we're going to absorb that as taxpayers, or that's going to be on the event organizer.
If I may, just one more time, from Shelling's perspective, we understand the need for protocol. We fully understand you all want to be as efficient as possible in metering out these permits. I think the devil's simply in the thresholds of where you draw the line with both the property type. Fully understand that if the town has leased a parcel of property, you will have procedures that need to come into place. But I think the concern that we would have is with normal courses of business operations that fall within our POAs that exist already that would not exceed those thresholds, would we then be, or any other business, be required to every weekend or by submitting a huge list of events that are internal to the business that are part of that normal course, would that be a requirement? And so that's where our concern lies.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. I mean, if you're having an event or a performer that, again, doesn't exceed what you're already approved for, does that apply? And I think that's why there's that's what, I mean, I have some question as to, I think there's some good enough questions here that, you know, I talked earlier about poking holes in this, and there's some pretty big ones that I'd like an answer to, like that question of whether there should be, whether you need one every Friday.
Mr. Chairman, I could speak to the permanent assembly, which Mr. Cousins referred to. Basically, there is no change. As long as they don't, our business establishment doesn't exceed its occupancy permit, and as long as the occupancy can in fact support, and meet the code requirements of having live entertainment, basically they're good to go. There is nothing more for us to do.
I understand, but it would still theoretically require them to do this permitting process when we already know there's no additional costs or efforts associated with it.
That isn't the intent of...
No, I understand it's not the intent. I don't think anybody's intending to do that, but reading this, it may be the effect. That's what I'd like to find out. I mean, it wouldn't take too many calls to Plymouth to see what does it apply to, what doesn't it apply to, is the wording different, or...
Like the Flying Monkey, like, for example, they probably have several hundred people there every Friday night.
You know, could we take another look at this and put, you know, just like what the chief said, you know, if we mention the permit saying something to the effect of, you know, those already having an assembly permit, you know, this does not apply to them or something to that, you know.
Right, I think there's some cleanup that's important before we, in my opinion, before we accept something like this. I think some of those key cleanups, additional things might be added to the document to cover those things that none of us intend this to cover anyways. Because reading it now, it might.
So I'm even thinking like an assembly permit, you know, so when we rent a large tent from Abbott's or whatever, I know the chief would come down in previous years and we'd have our assembly permit for that. So that would even cover a wedding, which I know was not necessarily in the definition, but a lot of those other concerns that would also cover, I would assume.
Any other input, questions? So I guess I'm either going to get a motion or not to accept this, or we can just table it and try to get some of the holes plugged.
Make a motion to table it.
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor of tabling it, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
All right, now we would just be on the new business.
Yeah, I'm trying to find my agenda. For crying out loud, where's my agenda?
It's right here.
Thank you. Through your report. This is all part of your report. No business. So new business. Clay Street Road closure, October 6th. What's the story?
Is that the,
I'll speak to that. Apparently the person that called me didn't realize he had to come here and speak for St. Rose, but St. Rose is doing a retirement party on the date indicated on the October 1st. And what they're requesting is road closure Clay Street and High Street. They did this during the summer. They do this typically during the summer for a block party for just the church itself, but they'd like to do it on that particular day during that time frame, and I have no objection to that whatsoever. They do a really good job setting up barricades, and we have routes that we can go around to avoid that particular area. They want to be able to cross back and forth between the church and the rectory and the parking lot and everything like that.
Okay.
they're gonna have several tents set up in their lawn, and one of the sisters are moving to France. It's going like.
You're good with it, Chief?
I'm good with it.
Question. Chief, now would this be just like the top of Clay Street, or I assume so, like people could still get into businesses and their residences on the rest of Union Street?
I'm not the organizer, but I would assume so. It
So it's been
sounds
done in
like
the
the same
past.
thing they've had in years past.
Okay.
Do we have to, do we have to do anything on this?
More than 50 people.
Do we have to approve this, or is this something that you can
You
approve?
have to approve the road closure. It's beyond the scope of what I can do in traffic ordinance, so you guys can approve the road closure.
Okay, all right. Any more input?
Are the homeowners notified? I'm sure they must be.
What's that?
Homeowners, they're notified? People-
I don't believe there would be any homeowners impacted in between the Clay Street area, because I think it's from the church's rectory, the bottom of their parking lot to the church and up, and the only area I don't believe it would affect a homeowner. But we can certainly ask them to do that.
Any other questions or input?
We should.
Which, say, define intersections.
Do we know what it is?
Yeah.
So I'm gonna go to the map.
What are the intersections from where?
I'm going to assume is that on Clay Street, the entire parking lot, church parking lot, the intersection of Jackson, Park Ave, and High Street, and the intersection of, or just beyond the intersection, probably closer to 101 High Street, on Clay Street, 101 High Street area, like in front of the Littleton Selectboard.
Okay, so there's...
I'll make a motion to close the mentioned streets as the chief laid out for us on October 6th from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m.
Second?
Any more discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, none. Okay. Closing one place. So we're to review and approve the conflict of interest policy.
So this one, Governor and Council has approved a $12,000 community development block grant for the planning of the cultural and arts center at the Opera House. The grant will provide professional services to design a build-out and support of local arts of the vacant, undeveloped Cottage Street level of the Opera House. The project will complete conceptual plans for this area that will be located at the Opera House and design a budget estimate. According to the CDBG, requirements are conflict of interest policy, ethics and conduct. Section 4.8 of our policy does not meet the grant requirements. So this update has been vetted by them and I believe recommended by them. It's in your board packet on page 34 and 36.
Should we make, if we vote on this tonight, should we make it effective as of tonight then versus 10/1?
You could.
19 could, to reflect the,
Yeah. I sent
You
you,
might just stay after to fill out forms so that they're in compliance. So you check every time, so.
Yeah, I haven't done my forms yet.
I sent you the ethics and conduct, the current one policy that we have. This is an addition to the current policy. This is for conflict of interest policy. I'd like to number it 4.8B and number our current policy with ethics and conduct 4.8A in our policy book. The conflict of interest policy is more detailed, and only once a year the form has to be filled out. And I'll give you an example of a case where I might fill one out. If I had brother that was doing some type of activity for the town that I might have to be part of the decision of, I would fill this out, explaining the situation. I would step down from the vote on that particular situation unless someone did, and this is similar to the banking items that I do with you. I put together the quotes that were given and I assign each bank a letter, A, B, C. So you have no idea what bank A, what bank C, what they are, and you make your decision based on that. So you're basically not involved with knowing what that bank is that we're choosing. That eliminated the conflict of interest issue on that. So a construction firm, if a construction firm was going to be something you would vote on, or Andrew was going to vote on, if it was a relative, he should step down from that. Or assign the work putting together everything and making it so that he does not realize who all the construction firms are or what the dollar amounts that they're talking about is. So basically taking it away from his hands and making it so it's there's no names assigned to it. This conflict of interest policy is for employees as well.
So the motion I recommended would be a little bit different. It would really, if you do this, considering the motion, that you adopt the amendment to the conflict of interest policy, amending the addition to be labeled as 4.8B, and the original language to be labeled as 4.8A, according to Karen's recommendation.
Is this the first, this is the first time we've had forms to fill out for this? We haven't had this, is that?
I think just disclosure prior.
We've never had a form before for disclosure.
Okay.
And our last
Just want to make
policy
sure I haven't
was,
missed doing stuff.
Oh, right.
our last policy was updated in 2002, so it is due on
Okay.
this.
Most nonprofits had to fill out one for the 990 anyway, conflict of interest statement, so these are pretty standard, or should be at least for municipalities.
Yeah, I read it. I've got no problem with any input, questions from the public? Entertain a motion.
I will make a motion to adopt the conflict of interest policy as presented, with a, should we do one exception to make it today's date versus October 1st?
We can wait because you don't have to respond.
Yeah.
Should we just do October 1st? Label it as 4.8B of the Town of Littleton the policy handbook, and at the same time, label section 4.8 as 4.8A ethics and conduct.
Seconded.
Any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Okay. Oh, review our meeting dates is next on the agenda. I think this, nothing's changed from what was sent to us, right? Okay. I don't know, do we need to discuss this?
I don't think we need to.
Just more FYI.
Okay, let's move on. Other business. Water and light gross appropriations is next. Where are we writing? What are we reading here?
Right down here under other business.
You want to just read the background?
We don't have that
So with Littleton Water and Light Department gross appropriations. So the New Hampshire Department of Administration has indicated that the town warrant should include Littleton and Water and Light's budget expenses and revenues similar to other departments for consideration at town meeting. Our legal counsel has indicated the opinion that the Board of Selectmen and Town Manager do not have legal requirement to include this department as part of its warrant. A difference of opinion exists between New Hampshire Department of Revenue Administration and Littleton Legal Counsel. Concern has been expressed that without Board of Selectmen direction, municipal staff are left to determine which opinion should be followed. So today we'd just be looking for the select board to potentially make a motion or discuss and motion on opinion.
Okay, so my understanding of this is, legal opinion is that we have no authority over enforcing that issue anyways, correct?
The selectmen's authority is to appoint board of commissioners to
Right,
water and light
it's the
department
commissioner's authority to
to
do this.
oversee the water and light budget for its membership.
So if DRA has a fight to pick, I gotta pick it with the, I mean, you guys can move up if you want. Or you don't want, that's fine. I mean, you know, it's not with us, we are not.
We don't see ourselves as
What is
part.
DRA's, what do I call it? Remedy? What could DRA do to us if we just stay out of it?
One thing I am aware of, if we do not include their budget, they may not have a budget to work from.
Who?
The Water and Light Department.
Well,
We
they
may
budget.
have to come up with the funds to operate the Water and Light Department out of the funds approved at town meeting. So I want to read 32:4, estimate of expenditures and revenues. All municipal officers, administrative officials, department heads, including officers of such self-sustaining departments as water, sewer, and electric departments, shall prepare statements of estimated expenditures and revenue for the ensuing fiscal year and shall submit such statements to their representative governing bodies at such time and in such detail as the governing body may require.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
As the governing body will require. So,
Scott?
The key word there is department. We are not a department. We're a separate entity.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not disputing that at all. I just don't, I recognize that
The word
municipal staff
department
needs
makes that-
direction from us.
The word department makes that not valid in this case.
And our legal counsel's opinion is the same, right? And I think
They've
we,
indicated that they're not required to do so. And they, I think as of today, actually began discussing it directly with the Department of Revenue so that they could work together.
as I understand from today, the counsel for the Department of Revenue, this is the first he's heard of this.
Yeah, as far as I know.
So,
right, so, I mean, this keeps rearing itself every so often, I mean.
yeah,
And if we've had legal opinions up the
yeah.
tailpipe, and it comes back to the same thing.
I'll make, well, then with discussion, I'll make a motion.
We can go ahead, we can still discuss it after you do that.
I think the town office needs direction one way or another. So I'd like to make a motion to direct the town manager and staff to not include the Littleton Water and Light Department gross appropriations in the warrant, and that the board of selectmen and town manager have no authority over the Littleton Water and Light Department.
Okay, first, second, had discussion, and now I'm going to open it up to public again. Go ahead.
Your motion used the word department again. It's not a department.
The Littleton Water and Light Commission,
Thank you.
element that.
Yeah, but isn't that what you're actually called, is Littleton Water and Light Department? Is that
No.
your-
No,
It's not?
I think it's what you call it.
Right. You look at any of the legal documents, the word department never showed up until like 1950 when they went in and fought against the town management form of government and blah, 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 blah. It's way before my time, but We were charted as a Littleton Water and Light.
You may want to take the department out of your website.
Well, I didn't, well, that's been there since 2000.
But the motion would cover it. I think that maybe calling it department goes a step beyond.
Let's just call it,
Littleton Water and Light.
let's call it Littleton Water and Light, be done with it.
That's fine. I can amend my motion to reflect that.
I'm sorry, can you repeat your motion again?
Sure. I'll make a motion that the board directs the town manager and staff to not include the Littleton Water and Light gross appropriations in the warrant, and that the board of selectmen and town manager have no authority over the Littleton Water and Light.
That's what you just said, right? Okay.
Maybe you should add beyond appointment of its commissioners, just because.
Right,
Yes, you don't want to mess up some.
Right.
Beyond appointment of its commissioners.
Yeah.
Oh boy, I hope that thing ran out of tape. Well, we had, so that's your amendment to your original motion, right? So we're going to have to second that amendment before we can.
I'll second.
Okay. So now we have to dispose of the.
You want to move it as amended?
Move it as amended, yeah, exactly. Any more discussion? All those in favor of the motion as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. You good?
You're not taking a public input, Mr. Chairman?
I'm sorry, didn't I do that already?
No.
Yeah.
I did?
That article, is he talking about?
Just for sure over here. Chair.
I'm sorry, I didn't see you ask, so go ahead.
Okay. You know, I find out about this thing over here through a couple emails. First of all, you know, a lot of people from Littleton, they really appreciated what you did, Chairman Frank Rossi, that as soon as they find out about what was going on, between the town manager and also the financial director, that they started this particular, argument between the town and the water line. Nobody ever knew nothing. But as soon as you find out, people know about that you went to the water line and you tried to straighten out all this mess that was created between the town manager, the financial director, and also, the water line. And people are really appreciate, what you did. Because you went over there, you tried to straighten out everything. You want to know. Actually, you've been the chairman of the settlement. You surely knew before they even started all this, commotion.
I'll let you continue, but I want to make a clarification.
Yeah, sure.
The town manager and the finance director didn't start this. The Department of Revenue Administration started this because they delivered the directive to them to have to deal with this. So I just don't want to throw anybody else under the bus. This was something that was forced upon us.
Yeah, but you find out and you just try to make the thing right and stuff like that. How did this thing happen? I mean, it's really, even the financial director or whatever it is, right, he tried to open such a big can of worm. Don't you think you should know about it just to stop it right there? You say, hey, we got a contract over here 30 years ago, 50 years ago.
Just so you know, we were aware of it. We've been aware of this in the past. We haven't addressed it because we haven't had to. With the latest communication from the Department of Revenue, forced us addressing this. Okay, this is something that's been going on for a long time that we know it's been working fine, but DRA decided that they wanted it working differently, or they thought it should be working differently. Let's put it that way. So it's not. It wasn't a complete surprise that it came up. It's just a little bit surprising that all of a sudden we're being forced to deal with it. Could be in the past it's kind of been brought up and kind of just ignored, so to speak.
That's what you try to say in the future. When the town manager he tried to do something or accomplish something, he should consult, you guys, the selectmen, right?
I understand, but I think the town manager does do that. I understand what you're
No
saying.
question about that. I'm just talking about this particular case.
Sure.
I mean, it's really, because this never would have happened if you would have found out before everything.
No, I disagree with that. It would have happened because the DRA forced it.
You keep saying town manager. This is a Department of Revenue Administration
It's the state
for
forced it.
state. And I appreciate it. You can recognize that we've said that, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We voted, right? Thank you. Okay, so we're all set with that. No board assessors, so public comment, finally, if you've been patient.
Thank you. My name is Jeff Cousins. I'm one of the founders of Showing Beer Company, and I'm joined by my business partner, John Lanzini. And I'd like to make some pithy remarks with reference to some of the public comments that a fellow Mill Street business owner made at the end of August. So in the interest of Monday Night Football, the public's interest, and the interest of I feel a little sheepish standing up here and defending my routine business operations. Let me start with that. And I think it's a shame that we've put the board in a position to be a mediating device, so to speak, in something, in a dispute that really should be taken on neighbor to neighbor. That's how we would like to proceed with something like this. And I think it's something that we should all endeavor to respect, especially as the town grows. As more businesses are coming in, as more entrepreneurs are being encouraged to come in and start their businesses here, that's the level where I think we need to be operating. But I felt that there was some evidentiary problems with what was presented to you, and I felt like there were some credibility problems that were presented to you. From an evidentiary perspective, there was no evidence that was presented that were blocking roads, that were encouraging buses to park along Mill Street, that were unloading our goods in the road, that were routinely prohibiting the passage of vehicles or even emergency vehicles. Why is that a problem? Because that doesn't happen. And so I wanted to set the record straight in that respect. Logically, there would be many other businesses on Mill Street that also had issues, from the inkwell, to the donut cellar, to shutters. All of these businesses would equally suffer were we blocking the road on a regular basis. Did we have road blockages a handful of times during our construction period? We most certainly did. We acted very quickly to remedy those. We worked with both chiefs. We worked with the public. We got them in, we got them out, we got them done. There were some problems, there were some hiccups, but they were not all day. They were not. They didn't go on for weeks. And similarly, if we're talking about 2019, did we have a couple of issues earlier this winter following major snowstorms? We did, because we had snowbanks that were encroaching on the roadway, and that caused a lot of problems, not only for our vehicles, but for other businesses' delivery vehicles that were on the road. And there were a handful of problems that we dealt with. This leads to the credibility concerns that I have. Andrew and I met with some other concerned Littleton and Mill Street specifically business owners to try to resolve this matter with our neighbor. We wanted to make sure that we understood his concerns. We needed to gain some perspective on where he was coming from. So we met with him, and we established a mechanism by which he would phone our facilities engineer as soon as he saw these issues developing. Instead, he chose to phone the public authorities. So I would submit to you that the delta between the number of times that he called the police or called Andrew and the number of times that he actually used the established mechanism to solve the problem with the neighbor maybe represents the interest in actually solving the problem. So I think we need to take that into consideration. We've also reached out to him a number of other times, on several occasions directly, to come into our facility, to understand our practices, to try to rectify whatever the situation is, and those were unsuccessful. And so I'm sorry to say. We're all growing. We all work with businesses using deliveries. We have narrow streets. We have a lot of pedestrian traffic. And we're, as a town, continually raising the level of public interest and awareness throughout the state and indeed throughout New England. So we all benefit from that. I think that the same vein, we need to work together to mend our differences. And so I just wanted to bring this to your attention, wanted to set the record straight, and I welcome any comments that you all have, whether now or at a later period of time. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. I would like to, first of all, thank you for coming in and giving your side of the story of what's going on. Because I was left with a very different impression from the last meeting, as I'm sure you could imagine. I know that the town manager has told me he's been working hard with trying to help coordinate and get everyone to alleviate what we know is a difficult situation, and sometimes more difficult than others. Your company, what you do there is a great asset to this community. It brings a lot of people in. I know for a fact in my travels from the work I do, I get comments all the time about people making trips up here. So I appreciate that, I really do. And I appreciate your comments about wanting to, this being a neighbor's issue, and it's hard for us to, and hard for the police department to police this on an immediate basis. So all I can say is thank you. I know it's difficult, and it's difficult for others too, and I appreciate your willingness to work with everyone to try to mitigate that as much as possible.
Well, I'd like to comment on that because I wasn't here for that meeting, and I think it was unfair some of the comments that were made. It painted a different picture of our response, but anytime that we're contacted, we do respond. Most often, the vehicle is gone before we get there. We do work very closely with not only Mr. Cousins and his associates, but there's another thing, and as a community our size, our traffic ordinance gives me the discretion to do certain things, and there are plenty of other instances on Main Street and Pleasant Street where we allow infractions for a very small amount of time so that merchandise can get unloaded off of vehicles very safely, but it's not black and white, and there is a certain level of discretion in there. But I can also say that we did some research, and there aren't a ton of calls and complaints down in that area. So I would like to leave you with this, is that if somebody does make a complaint, please do it directly to the Littleton Police Department Dispatch, not to a select board member. So that way those things, or to a town manager, or to anything but the dispatch center, so that we can properly document the need for either more services, less services, what our response times were, because that doesn't happen. But again, we do have discretion. There are times when there are merchants and business owners that are unloading property and business-related things in a parking zone on Mill Street, and it isn't blocking the entire roadway. And guess what? We say, as soon as you're done, please move your vehicle. We don't write them a ticket. It's just that's the right thing to do. So we're going to continue to do that as long as I'm chief.
Thank you, Chief.
I may be under the mistaken impression that there was going to be discussion of the illegal operation of a commercial business in a residential district on Far Hill Road. Is that incorrect on my part, that was not on your agenda tonight?
I don't see it on the agenda, no.
I had been informed that it would be on the agenda.
I'm sorry, it isn't. Did anybody reach out to put it on the agenda?
There was a court case today, a zoning court case at the Superior Court here on that topic.
I don't know.
Then let me make a public comment, okay? My name's Edward Roberts. My wife and I...
One moment, please. I want to dispose of this other discussion
thought
first.
you had?
Well, I want to make sure we have.
Okay.
Is there any more comments on that issue?
Simon from the Donut Cellar. I've spent a good year down on Mill Street, and I just wanted to take a moment during the course of the conversation to say, I look out my window at the road every day, and there are no traffic concerns that I have witnessed. Having said that, I don't know what the appropriate venue is, who the appropriate people to talk to are, and I certainly do appreciate the chief who's been one of those people who he's stopped by and said, okay, you're unloading, you're fine. I have gotten ticketed before just unloading stuff because I had to step away to do something nobody knew who I was. I think they're trying to ease me. But just the policy down there in general, where that would be directed, because there are shops on the street and there is undue hardship at times trying to get in and out of your own space just to conduct business. You know, we have storefronts, but technically no parking to even pull up to. And at times, it feels kind of paramount to harassment as you're just trying to operate. In general rule, I have the police called on me. I've been there for 15 minutes just trying to unload some stuff. I've got an elderly customer who pulled up because they can't walk very far. They just want to come and get something and leave. You know, it just seems like undue hardship because the roadway in general seems to have plenty of capacity for traffic to come and go and for people to stop. You know, we as business owners don't have control over what every person on the street chooses to do or not to do. We don't encourage that necessarily, but I mean, people stop all the time. I've had plenty of opportunity to witness what happens when they do, and nothing happens. The roadway isn't blocked. There's plenty. I've seen cars on both sides as people have stopped, and Mack trucks drive right through the middle. So I'm not sure what the issues are or how they developed completely because I haven't been part of the conversation from the beginning. But whatever the appropriate channels are, I would like to know what the appropriate channels are to further that conversation because it's putting undue pressure. I've talked to Jonathan Stroker up the street as well. His business suffered 30% when parking disappeared on that street completely. And I'd like to know what the process is and what's appropriate to address that. And also just want to take the time to just support Jeff in what he has said and what he has observed. I have not observed any traffic issues down there. Most of the time the street is completely empty of traffic altogether. Flows freely, and I have not witnessed any issues whatsoever. So.
Thank you. I don't know, how do we address that?
So,
Is your question, I'm sorry, is your question in reference to policy, whether or not there should be parking or no parking on that street? Is that what you're kind of...
Yeah, I guess for the most part, Chief, yes.
Then it's the people in front of you.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. I wanted to make sure before I made an addition with the wrong group of people, you know, because I just didn't know who the correct people to address that with was. Because the truth is, as Jeff pointed out, that street continues to grow. It continues to grow in popularity both with local customers and with tourists who are very excited about what's happening down along our river district. And people from all over New England are just surprised, pleasantly surprised by what we have developing down there. And the present policies that we have in place, I'm not sure if they're a necessity, if there is a necessity of some sort that I'm not aware of. I have not gotten that impression from anybody that I've talked to about it. It seems to be more, as Jeff has pointed out, interpersonal conflict with people on the street itself that have created the policies that are presently in place. But I can speak as a business owner down there, it is putting undue pressure on the businesses that are trying to help develop Littleton into a place where consumers enjoy their products. So,
we've had multiple engineers look at this very issue, and we will have a new street design for consideration under the Transportation Alternative Program. We have 2 projects planned for Mill Street and Cottage Street. Mm-hmm. And on Mill Street, it's the sewer and stormwater, but then also the pedestrian way, and that includes additional parking. And it will be up to the board to determine, you know, how much and how long and if it will be allowable. So.
Just out of curiosity, what is the what should we be preparing for that? Like, what is the procedure and the process as far as who has final say on those? Is there a public vote on it? Is it simply the selectmen who choose? Like, how do we prepare for that?
Well, so I think that if I recall, it was at 2016 when the select board took up the no parking on Mill Street.
16 or 17.
And so I think that could be addressed. And is it an amendment to the traffic ordinance, or is it a postage of signs? I think it was amendment to the traffic ordinance.
It can be by order of the board. The board determines that, then they put up the signage. So you don't have to amend the traffic ordinance. They can just vote on it.
With no public hearing required? I don't believe so.
That would be a question. I think you should have a public hearing.
Yeah, so what we would probably do then is hold a public hearing, which requires a certain amount of notice, similar to what we did earlier in the meeting. The board would open a public hearing. You could submit a request with even a plan that the board could consider, and they could, if they feel
Isn't the River District, I think in late October, November, sometime like that, we were talking about having the River District host the engineers to kind of show the plans for Mill Street coming up. I mean, that may be a good time to, you know, get an update from the engineers, what's been looked at, but also some public feedback of what they're doing, and then of course the construction timeline for 2020.
Yeah. We've just been approved to enter into final engineering, engineering design.
That's what the
plan. Yeah, which would also include, the plan right now does include a recommendation of adding parking on the opposite side of the street, on the showing side of the street. So I know there's some opposition to it from Mill Street property owners, but our engineers are designing a plan that's best for all.
And when is that supposed to be presented for a review, first review or whatever?
So we've had an initial review of options that was done, could have been a year ago.
Yeah.
I don't know how long this takes. I think in the presentation I showed you last week, each step can take up to 1 month to 6 months. So
Yeah, that's right. But I think what Mr. Simon is talking about is a more immediate remedy to.
Oh, I'd love for it to be, but yeah, I mean, I understand the need for due process as well.
Yeah.
But I mean, if it is possible to submit a request to have that looked at even before, even if it's temporary, if you're not looking for anything earth-shattering down there, just the opportunity to have customers, you know, feel really, I think all of us, our interest level is in short-term parking, you know, just 10, 15 minutes for people to be able to hop out, go into our shops, pick something up. Because I can't tell you how many customers at this point I've had who finally make it into the shop who say, hey, listen, we've tried a bunch of times, but we do the block 4 times and there's no place to stop, and then we just move on.
And then the police are gone.
And yeah, you know, so once again, like Jeff said, it would be great if we could work that out as neighbors. It's a one-sided conversation most of the time at this point from the sounds of things. I have not talked to all the people in question personally, so I can't speak from that perspective, but yeah.
Well, it sounds like as far as any immediate remedy or alternative to what's there now, is it safe to say approach you would approach the department heads, and then some idea would come to the...
Come up with a proposal, submit it to us for the board to consider. Their next meeting is the next select board meeting date,
October 23rd.
October 23rd, so potentially could be considered.
No, wait, sorry, 28th.
You
The
sure?
last week.
Okay. Yeah,
great.
so bring it in.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yes.
Caroline Simon, I am co-owner of the Donut Cellar, and I just have a question. When we do submit our suggestion or request, would the selectmen find it more compelling if we had a petition signed by a lot of citizens, Littleton citizens, requesting and wanting to see parking in that area or supporting a particular plan? Would you find that helpful?
Well, I'll speak for myself personally, and I'll let the others speak for themselves, but it certainly would mean something new, particularly not who they are in terms of who the citizens are, but in terms of their geographic location to the area in question and how it impacts them. That would mean it would be a significant consideration for me.
Thank you.
One point, if I may. One additional consideration as we develop the public space across the bridge, you will have increasing pedestrian drop-offs as well as folks who are looking for parking along Mill Street. We have that right now, and going back to the discussion at the end of August, there was an assertion that there was a school bus that was parked on the side of the road, and the occupants of that were going to our business. That was in fact a group that was doing something over across on the green on the other side. And so I would imagine that those types of events would happen with greater frequency in the future. So it's something that we will want to consider because there are multiple businesses now operating down there in that space. Thank you all for your time today.
Thank you. Okay, now, I'm sorry. So are we on the same issue or a different issue?
A different issue.
Okay, go ahead.
My name's Ed Roberts. In the 70s, my wife and I bought our home on 700 Far Hill Road. Over the years, we inhabited it, expanded it, paid taxes on it, and we probably are the largest landowner on Far Hill Road and its surrounds. At the bottom of the hill, or near the bottom of the hill, is an illegal commercial operation of at least 2 companies in the same location that, in my understanding, had been ordered a year ago to vacate the premises, which is a totally residential premise.
Okay.
Furthermore, it's more than a residential premise. It is one of 2 streets in the town of Littleton that have legally been determined to be a scenic street, legally, under petition and...
I have to interrupt you for 1 second.
Yes.
I know you've been waiting here a long time, but
Yeah.
there's a policy in place for when, if you want to address the issue, it needs to be on the agenda. And
I had been informed it was on the agenda.
I'm not sure who informed you of that. Because it's
I don't
not
want
on
to say,
the...
but I believe it was this gentleman in his message left for me on my phone.
It might have been a zoning issue, it sounds like it is, and that you were notified by the zoning office that today there was a court case across the street, or actually on this side of the street.
There's a court case.
There was one this morning. Today.
I'm sorry, then it was my mistake. I was not notified.
Okay.
I was not notified. I would have assumed I should have been notified.
It definitely is a zoning issue that
And is there a disposition of the court case?
it was just this morning, and we haven't heard anything.
They're allowing for 2 weeks of
Rebuttal or?
2 weeks to compile information.
But that was just, I thought that had to do with Pike Ave.
I don't know.
It's a very...
Why don't you call the office tomorrow?
Yeah, it's definitely a zoning issue, so if a zoning board was going to hear it...
Zoning board?
Yeah, it would be on a Tuesday evening at 6
p.m.
How does a zoning board permit a commercial operation in residential space? They redefine residential space to be non-residential?
I don't know that it's been permitted. I do know that we have several issues that the zoning officer is attempting to enforce.
2 companies, one says on their trucks, on their vans, Tavernus Property, another one says Tavernus Transport. Last night I counted 17 vehicles on the outside in that area.
This is one that's been found to be in violation by the zoning officer, and it is the same business that's was the court case was in today.
Also, I don't believe Mr. Roberts would be, he would receive any notification via mail, because I don't believe he's in a fire.
Right. The zoning officer may have contacted you to tell you about the court case today. That's probably what I assume would happen.
I don't know.
Okay.
Did you get any correspondence?
I sent a note to the Board of Selectmen and you, and I thought on my message, I thought it was you, but it was blurred, and went through the entire process, told me about a year ago date in which they were supposed to have vacated, that somebody, whoever it is, gave me the message, a mail, said that they had found another place in town to move on the other side of town, which unfortunately was also a residential place and was under protest by neighbors there, and that I thought it was September 23rd was going to be a hearing. It could very well have said a court case, and I mistook that to mean the Board of Selectmen hearing. So it probably is my fault for not understanding what the process was. Anyway.
Well, it's good to hear, though.
You will inevitably, by the way, within 2 years, get another petition by the lovely apple orchard that is halfway up the hill, when that person begins to operate a public vehicle of trying to bring people in to the large parking lot that he will be in the process of building soon in the same residential district.
Thank you.
Wants to comment or no?
Yeah, I want to recall at one time this was on one of the zoning board dockets. I mean, it would be interesting, you know, with...
It's not a Board of Selectmen's issue.
No, but it would be interesting to see if the zoning officer has any records on this, or where the status of that case was, and any reviews that he's done. Not the apple orchard, no.
It's in court today.
Okay, was that the Pike, their address on Pike Street, Ave, or Which case?
Perhaps we can get Mr. Rums's contact information and I'll get a hold of Mr. Brass or somebody get a hold of Mr. Brass and he can talk, because he would be the proper person for him to talk to express his concern about what's going on.
Thank you.
I think Mr. Bratz might already have it, because I think that conversation probably from.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Karen.
Okay, this is a little bit related to water and light. I want to really thank you, all of you selectmen, for making the decision. I feel much better now. I was very concerned, as you read, about what I was required to do and what I wasn't. And I am not the financial director anymore. I'm a finance manager. When I got done full-time, my title changed and some of my responsibilities changed. But I do want to say I truly appreciate the decision you made.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Any more comments? Any more public comments? Thank you.
Make a motion to go into, oh, you guys are doing minutes, right?
Yeah, we're gonna
That
go.
was an avenue.
Next is the minutes. I've been through all of them. I don't, you can take them one at a time, but I don't have any changes to any of them.
I don't either.
Okay, so then I'm going to entertain a motion to accept all of them.
I'll make a motion to accept the Board of Selectmen's meeting minutes on October 22nd, October 24th, and on November 5th. Okay. And these are all in 2018.
And since you weren't here, I guess I have to second that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. 2 ayes and 1 abstention, I guess.
Right.
Okay, so we don't close this hearing. We need to go into non-public
Yes.
under RSA 91-A:3(2)D.
So moved.
Oh.
Second.
We gotta do a voice vote on this, right? You have to do a roll call.
Yes.
Aye, Chad Stearns, Selectman.